Are we gonna do this, guys? Are we
We're
gonna get
here.
around it? Oh, we're doing this.
We're
I'm
here.
sorry.
Welcome in to another edition of 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. I'm your fill-in host, Mr. Casio. That is the vacuum of some people leaving because they see my chubby face. But Eric, you're stuck with me. How are you, sir?
I'm so happy to be stuck with you, man. It's been a long time since we've shared a Zoom screen or a StreamYard screen. So yeah, no, I'm glad you're here, brother. You always
It
make me
has.
laugh.
We are broadcasting, of course, in front of a live audience. Thanks to our ad-free shows family. We appreciate everybody there. We'll try to get this isn't Ask Eric Anything, so we'll get to questions wherever we can. We've got some sent in, and if we can, we'll get some from the chat as well. How's everything in your life? What? Every time I talk to you, you've banned something from your life: meat, air, water, carbs. What is your current status, Mr. Bishop?
Well, never meat, man. I'm a carnivore.
Oh yeah, you
I'm an evangelical mucker futher when it comes to the carnivore diet. Big fan of it. But yeah, I don't do carbs. I don't do sugar. I don't do processed food. I don't do soft drinks. I don't do. I mean, I just eat really healthy, and I feel great. I don't feel like I'm missing anything.
You know, you after you went on the first time you did the just the fasting. Did you know that Conrad was doing it?
No.
I want everybody to know that he didn't do the pure fasting, but he did just eat meat and clear the system out.
Yeah.
And I was absolutely stunned at how long he did it. That he was really doing it. That I could not peer pressure him off of it. And he also said he was feeling better. So that was super cool to see that kind of spreading out after that.
It really is it's a lifestyle choice. That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
Is especially if you're someone like Conrad who conducts a lot of business outside of the office, restaurants, dinner meetings, that type of thing. You have to be really, really committed to do the carnivore diet long term. But I don't live that lifestyle. When I'm not on the road, conventions or whatever, I'm at home and I have control over everything, and it's really easy for me. But I'll never go off of the carnivore diet. I'm not 100% carnivore. I should say that. I get about 90 to 95% of my calories from meat. The rest of it, probably 5, maybe sometimes up to 10%. I get from, like, I take AG1, which is a prebiotic supplement, which is plant-based. So I do a scoop of that in the morning. I'll occasionally do kratom as well in the morning, depending on what I have to do that day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do like sauerkraut or kimchi, some kind of fermented cabbage, because it's really good for your gut biome. But that's it. Everything else is just meat. And when I say meat, it's like chicken, fish, meat products, milk. I don't drink a lot of milk, but cheese if I want it. But it's pretty cool, man. I dig it. And I like to cook. So, it's kind of challenging to find new ways to cook new shit.
A lot of stuff going on in your life. By the way, shout out to Dave McClay watching live. He said, I've been doing the carnivore diet for 3 days now and already feel great. How about that?
It's amazing what it can do for you, man. Especially for people that are pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, it is absolutely mind-blowing what a carnivore diet can do for you. In terms of inflammation, just a million different things that all of a sudden go away.
Eric, I want to tell everybody watching ad-free shows, I have watched it. I don't know if you have had a chance to see it yet, but Conrad just sat down with Dennis Knight, better known to wrestling fan as Tex Slazenger, Phineas, Godwin, or the Naked Midian, as I prefer to refer to him, over at the False Finish series over at adfreeshows.com. Dennis joins a long line of people who want to get their hands on you, Eric. So great stuff.
What the fuck did I do to him? I didn't do anything to him. Stand in line, you whiny bitch. I never did a thing to you. A lot of people that want to get their hands on me.
Our producer Silver, do we want to wait show that video as a tease at the end?
Well, we can show it right now and get Eric's response.
I was about to say, is he going to get fired up? Should we get some questions out of the way?
What do you think, Eric? What do you
Just
think?
save it to the end, because if it pisses me off, it'll fuck up my vibe for the whole show.
That's what I think. That's what
And
I
I'll
was
just
voting.
be ripping. People be asking me perfectly legitimate, polite questions, and I'll be going off on some kind of fucking dark, twisted tangent.
You got it.
All right, we're gonna roll that beautiful bean footage at the end. The clip from Midian talking about Mr. Bischoff.
Why am I cutting a promo on Midi? Why does this guy even give a shit who I am? I never did anything to him. What the fuck?
I can't.
I didn't make you pose naked, you big goof.
All right, let's get into some questions. We'll first start with already sent in over on the ad-free shows platform. We'll start with Angel T17. Said, Eric, what if you bought WCW in 2001 instead of Vince McMahon? What kind of stars would you have brought to the company?
It's too hard to say. I mean, that's a good question. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate it. But it's one of those questions where to answer it really honestly, with any degree of truth, I'd have to sit down and kind of look at who is available at that time and play with it in my head. And that might be something fun to do over a couple hours on a Zoom with a cocktail or four. But to answer it here in this kind of a format, that'd be kind of tough. But it is a good question. And maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll book WCW version 2.0 fantasy booking 2001. We'll do that on every show some point.
That sounds like some good bonus content there.
Sounds like a night of drinking to me, but whatever.
Yeah, okay, I'm in. Brandon the Broker hit us up. He said, what if DX would have been greeted by the original 3 NWO? Would you have worked something out with Vince on the spot to allow some kind of crossover, or would you have stuck to your guns, Eric?
Oh, hell, I would have done a crossover in a heartbeat. But there was no interest in WWE wanting to do any kind of crossover. They were winning. They had momentum. They didn't need to make a move like that. They may have a year previously, but they certainly didn't need to at that point. But yeah, I would have been, I'm a fairly open-minded guy. I would have had some fun with that.
I think that's always one of the big what ifs is what if somebody would what if they would have been greeted? That's one of those great fantasy booking things that just
here's what would have happened. I guarantee you, if the WCW guys would have been there and squared off with Triple H and the DX guys, you know what would have happened? I'll be high-fiving. There'd be a couple over in the corner behind a production truck smoking a joint.
Yeah. I know who those are, yeah.
I got a 12-pack in the back of my car. I was going to grab a beer before the show starts. That's what would have happened. That's real life. If anybody thinks there was any animosity or tension between the WWE crew and the WCW crew, trust me, there was not. There was not. There was no company loyalty. There was no loyalty to me. There was no loyalty to anybody other than, hey, haven't seen you in a long time, bro. Come on over. What's up? It would have been a social event.
Let's go to, we are recording in front of the live AFS family. Let's jump in and get one of those questions. PJ Taints, Professor Taints. He says, Eric, what, if anything, can you share about your talk with Mr. Ric Flair? Of course, that's been the headlines all over, but how was your talk with Mr. Flair?
I had 2 conversations with him. I had a conversation with him, I think, on Wednesday afternoon, where we said, hey, we're going to do this thing, and, we're ready to do it. We're going to square off. I just wanted to get a sense of where his head was at, and we did, and we both agreed to do the show, and then maybe Tuesday I talked to Rick, and then Wednesday, yesterday I got a call from Rick, and he just said, look, I've been thinking about it, and I just don't want to stir up any more shit. It's not worth it to me anymore. I went, I don't blame you, bro.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for not seeing your name in the headlines every once in a while. And constantly just being out front, even if it's just doing interviews and being, you can be honest, but you could still be confrontational. And that's what it probably would have ended up being. Rick would have been very honest and it would have been confrontational, but I think Rick just isn't of the frame of mind to deal with the fallout from that. Sometimes my wife suggests that I not engage in such confrontational dialogue in social media. So it's probably a healthy thing. And I'm glad because I like Rick. And I did say this to Rick, man. I love Rick. I've always loved Rick, no matter how crazy things have gotten. There's just something about that charming son of a bitch. I don't know what it is.
He just sucks you back in.
Yeah.
He just sucks everybody back in.
Well, and it's, hey, the best times I've ever had in professional wrestling have been with Ric Flair. The worst times I've ever had in professional wrestling have been with Ric Flair. But there's a lot of stuff in between that's pretty fun too. So we're good.
All right, let's keep it going. Jim Con 1479 says, you seem like a positive guy, Eric. How did you get over setbacks in your career and find the energy to move forward?
Well, for better or worse, rarely have I ever let anything that looks like a setback affect me emotionally. I mean, I've won a lot, I've lost a lot, ended up somewhere in the middle a lot, but for me, it's always been, okay, next. That didn't work. Next. It's never been, I've never been the type of person that kind of wallowed in disappointment or failure or realizing that I made a bad choice. Just recognize it. What am I going to learn from it? Fuck it. Move on. Next.
It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that sports mentality of a quarterback. Every play is the most important play. Focus on it. Do it. You throw a pick, though, you got to act like it never happened and move on to the next most important play.
Otherwise, you're carrying it around. You're second guessing. Yeah. And this, look, I've not always been this way. I was the victim of being exactly the opposite for a big part of my life. When it came to business, I was always pretty durable. I mean, I never took losses or failures or mistakes. I never took them hard. On a personal basis, though, when it comes to relationships, I had more difficulty just moving on. Let's put it that way. But it's just come with time. My wife has had a major influence on me, and I, realized one day, just, man, I spend a lot of energy carrying around negative shit. It's never going to do me any good. Can't make any money off of it. It's not going to make me healthier. It's not going to make me happier. It's not going to improve my relationship with my family or with God. So if I'm carrying all this stuff around, it's making me miserable and it's not going to benefit me in any way, shape, or form. Why am I carrying it around? And that light bulb went off in my head. And just ever since then, I'm pretty good about just letting shit go.
That's a great mentality, my friends. It's hard for some people to do. It's the crazy part, but that's how life is in human nature. But I fully agree. You just got to, next day is the next day. Let's keep figuring out how to move on and figure it out the next time and do the next thing. Miley and Aubrey vlog 5769. Who is someone that you thought might become a star in WCW, but for whatever reason, he just did not? I've always been a bit amazed that Wrath wasn't more over. Man, I haven't heard that name in a while.
Yeah. And that's a good observation too. So much of it is timing. I think Wrath is a guy that, had he come along to WCW a year or 18 months earlier, things could have been different. He came in at a tough time. Tough meaning he came in when things were rocking. Kind of hard to break through the clutter at that point. Another one is Ernest Miller. Ernest Miller come into WCW 24 months, maybe 36 months before he did, you'd still be seeing Ernest Miller doing something fun in WWE or somewhere else. He was so good. He had so much natural charisma and talent. He didn't have the time in the ring and the experience for a long enough period of time and the exposure that comes with it to really build equity with the audience, because the wrestling audience is pretty tough. You've got to be around for a long time before they really bro you in, right? And you have that real connection to a vast majority of the fan base. It takes a long time. You can get their attention very quickly, and they may stick with you for a while, but to get that real brand loyalty, that character equity, that takes time. And Ernest, because he was such an athlete, um, had he had another year or two ring time so that his in-ring ability could have caught up to his natural charisma and
Yeah.
just the entertainment quotient, he'd have been a superstar.
It's amazing every time I meet somebody that has met Ernest at a con or whatever the place, he's been to Top Guy weekends and some of our get-togethers there. Every time they leave and go, man, that was a great guy. I had a fun time, made me laugh. Just a great guy to be around. And I'm with you. Just his mic skills were. I mean, he just has that charisma where you want to focus on him.
And you hardly had to give him any direction.
Yeah.
I mean, he had to know what the storyline was, give him a couple pointers in terms of where we're going next. And then you could just turn him loose and let him go. And he just nailed it. He was so good. I wish he would have had about 24 months under his belt before he did. And things would have been a lot different for him, but he's still a great guy. Ernest is coming out to my house here in August. Ernest and Sonny, Jim Duggan and his wife are going to be here, and we're all going to cook steaks and hang out on the deck and look at mountains and shit.
That sounds like a fun damn time right there.
You won't suck.
Eric, let's tell you about, I know we talked about at the beginning of the show, how important your health is to you, Eric, and everything you do. You pay attention to what you put in your body and everything that means to you. And that's why I know Signos is proud to be a proud sponsor of 83 Weeks, an incredible program, and they're going to take care of our 83 Weeks listeners. Diabetes is really big in my family, so I know how important this is. But Signos giving you that real-time glucose access, checking you out. What's your chance to prevent type 2 diabetes? You can check that out with our friends over at Signos, Eric.
I am absolutely a firm believer in Signos and your ability to monitor your blood glucose. I watch and it's for me and my wife, it's really a hobby. We're not doing this because we have to do it. We're doing it because we want to do it, and we're so fascinated with the access to technology, like we're seeing here with Signos. This is technology that the only way you would have had access to it 5-10 years ago was through your doctor. And not only would it have been much more expensive, it would have been a lot more inconvenient. And now you have access to this technology that can tell you in real time how different foods affect your metabolism and spike your insulin. And you can monitor your blood glucose levels so you can maximize your energy and improve your health in so many different ways. There's not enough time for us to talk about it here, but let me be really clear. If you're interested in your health, whether it's longevity, whether it's performance, whether you just want to feel awesome and have optimal brain function, because so much of what goes on in your brain or doesn't go on in your brain starts in your gut. And when you start to learn the connection between what you eat, how you eat, when you eat, and your blood glucose levels and where you get those insulin spikes, once you can see that in real time and you start making the connections between what you're doing, what you're eating, and where your blood glucose is and where your insulin is getting spiked, when you start dialing that in, I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not a doctor. I'm not anything. I'm just an average guy that's really interested in being healthy. For me personally, my energy level has gone through the freaking roof. My ability to focus, which has always been a challenge for me because I ate too many carbs. I was eating too many things that affected my blood sugar and then affected my brain. I'm so much more on the money creatively in terms of carrying on conversations, my ability to focus on things that I'm not necessarily even really that interested in, but feel like I need to focus on, whether it's work or otherwise, off the charts. And it all starts for me with knowing what's going on with my blood glucose.
Those real-time results that you were talking about, Eric, literally real-time. Had a glass of wine with dinner. How did that change your energy level? How did that affect your blood sugar? Did you go on a walk after your meal? How does that affect it? Did you have a beer at lunch? Did you skip lunch? literally real-time results, and you can start figuring out what you need to change in your lifestyle, what makes you feel bad, what makes you feel good, and change it in real time with Signos. Signos has removed the guesswork of weight loss and can provide you with tools and knowledge you need to develop healthier habits. It combines glucose data from the CGM, or that's the continuous glucose monitor, with an AI-driven app, and that's going to deliver real-time glucose insights for optimal health and weight management. And right now, Signos has an offer exclusively for our listeners. Go to signos.com. That's signos.com and get up to 20% off select plans by using code 83weeks today. That's signos.com. Use the code 83 weeks to get up to 20% off select plans for you today. And we appreciate Signos for being a proud sponsor of everyone here at 83 weeks.
And you know what makes me feel good other than Signos?
What's that?
Brian Lestat. He gifted 5 83 weeks memberships from
What?
83weeks.com. See, that's a cool thing.
Whoa.
That's why we love this family. They're not only the most enlightened group of wrestling fans anywhere in the world, but they're generous too. And I love that. Spread the word. That's the word. Spread the word. I love it.
Gifted memberships. That's a family right there, man. That's part of that family right there. We appreciate that, Brian. We appreciate that. And everybody joining us in the live chat. Speaking of, let's get back to the live chat and get a question there before we jump back in our questions. Jim Pazinski, Jim in Buffalo. He's got a question for you.
You froze up on me, bro.
I'm here.
Oh, I got you now.
I'm here. Let's jump back in the chat, Eric, and get a question from our live audience here. That nice audience that is gifting memberships. Jim in Buffalo has hit us up. Says, Eric, we know you don't watch every week, but thoughts on the direction of the bloodline angle. I'm impressed how Paul Heyman has kept it going and built anticipation for Roman's return.
I've been traveling so much over the last 4 weeks, I haven't watched any wrestling at all. So I wish I could comment, and I could take the easy way out and make it sound like I did, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. But no doubt, based on the discipline that I've seen in WWE storytelling over the last 6 months or 10 months, I am absolutely certain it's being done with perfection, particularly because Paul Heyman's involved.
Well, I'll do the follow-up from Jim then. He also says, nice shirt. As a former brewer of beer yourself, did you see any of the promotion for Hulk's Real American Beer? I'm looking forward to trying it. Are you?
I have not seen that. I did not know.
I did not either.
He just called me yesterday, and I missed him because I was recording something else. And I'm going to call him back this afternoon as soon as I'm done here. I'll ask him about it. I didn't know that. Now, Dog Tank Brewing was a guy that I met when I was brewing beer. We have Buffalo Bill Cody beer, which is still available here in Cody, Wyoming. You can still find it. It's on taps in different bars around town. But when we launched that, I met a guy who was he was an Iraqi vet. I'm assuming he was Army. Could be wrong on that. And he and a bunch of other vets got together and created their own independent brewery, and they called it Dog Tank Brewing. And you get your can. They would can their beers, and it was distributed around the United States. And they had a picture of a fallen soldier and his or her birth date, and some information about him or her, and that was on the back of each can. So I don't know how they're doing now. He moved from Montana out to Virginia or somewhere to a bigger brewery. So hopefully he's doing well.
Well, we'll check that out. Thanks for the heads up. I didn't see the Real American Beer, so I can't wait to go look at
I didn't either. That's a good one, though. That's a perfect timing. You could fill that Bud Light gap.
Thank you for that, Jim in Buffalo. Appreciate you joining us and interacting. Let's get back to the submitted questions. Jay Banks 979 hit us up and said, I know so much of what actually killed WCW was the many Turner mergers and the fact that Ted was no longer in charge of the company. I'm just curious, if given the chance to change one creative decision made during your time in charge, what would that be?
I would have had Ron Reese come out dressed like a mummy trying to butt fuck anybody. I'd have killed that scene. That scene should have never happened.
Well, when you put it that way, it seems like a logical decision.
It was horrible. Horrible.
I might not recover for that. For a while. When put that way, it seems like the right call to not do.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sometimes things are, it may look good on paper, but man, oh man.
what a way to put it. Oh, I can't even read the question. My eyes are watering. Mladen says, was it ever considered to return Bobby Heenan to a manager role?
No. No. Bobby, I think Bobby would have. I'm not going to suggest he would have done it, didn't want to do it. I got the impression he was no longer interested in doing that for any number of reasons, I guess. Maybe because he did it for so long, he just didn't want to do it anymore. Bobby also had some physical, he had a bad, really, really bad neck. He was scared to death of being in a situation where inadvertently he ended up taking a bump. So my guess is that may have had something to do with it. Because if you're a manager and, it's one thing to be standing there, holding a mic. It's another thing to be out there at ringside as a manager. That's where something can go wrong. So that might have been part of it, or maybe he just liked it. He was more comfortable behind the desk. I don't know.
All right. Eddie Bamber wants to know, do you think the name All Elite Wrestling holds the company back? In the 90s, it was World Championship Wrestling versus World Wrestling Federation. It sounded like two giant global forces competing. Now, none of the non-WWE promotions even sound like they are competing. What do you think goes into the name?
I think a lot. Your name should speak to the brand, and your brand should speak to your core audience. AEW sounds like a plumbers union or something, an electrical workers union.
Yeah.
It doesn't resonate. No acronym is going to resonate until you make it resonate. But I think when you launch a new company in particular, your brand is the most powerful thing that you have in the beginning and how you build that brand. And I think the AEW thing was, it just doesn't roll off the tongue the way it should. It doesn't have that presence when you hear it. It doesn't make you, I don't know. This doesn't work for me. Now, maybe it's because the product is so fucking lame that it's lived up to the lameness of the name of the company. I don't know. It's just lame.
So Eddie's on to
everything
something.
about
Yeah.
is when AEW, where the best wrestlers in the world, can't draw a dime. I don't know.
Just think
they're paid millions and they can't draw a dime.
just think if we had shown you Midian already, you'd really be fired up right now.
See, I wasn't even going to say anything negative about AEW. Fucking Midian pissed me off.
Mike, no, excuse me. Malenko 8501 said, were there any talks of AOL Time Warner keeping WCW but selling the TV rights to another network, or were the execs so against wrestling that they didn't want WCW on their portfolio at all? Do you think that if they sold the TV rights, would WCW still be in business today?
That wouldn't have made any sense. I mean, there's no way a deal like that would ever make sense on paper to anybody. No, look, it was clear, and then even more clear now as a result of the first two episodes, I think, of Who Killed WCW, because now we're hearing from Stu Snyder, we're hearing from Brad Siegel, we're hearing from Dick Cheatham, who was the Turner executive in the finance division that oversaw the Braves and the Hawks, and Omni Arena, and WCW from the very beginning, not just towards the end. And Dick Cheatham saw all of the shenanigans that were going on in WCW, particularly towards the end. And it's really interesting. I heard Brian Alvarez talking. I listened to a brief clip where Alvarez was being interviewed the other day because he's co-authored a book called The Death of WCW, which evidently is getting a resurgence because of the documentary. And that book is such a piece of shit put together by two hacks who had no sources, did zero research. They just had friends who had friends that knew somebody that was in the locker room That's probably an exaggeration, but probably not much. And yet you've got Guy Evans' book, 120 interviews with executives, some of whom I never even had a chance to meet face to face, all of whom had their fingerprints on WCW. But Dave Meltzer and Brad Alvarez choose to discount all of that, just pretend that didn't happen because they're so locked into their narrative and what they've been telling people for 25 years. And now it's all being exposed. And I think it's awesome. But if you listen to Dick Austin, if you listen to Dick Cheatham, if you listen to some of the people that were actually there, there was no way anybody at AOL Time Warner would have considered doing anything to keep WCW as an asset, because they were doing everything they could to bury it. Again, Dick Cheatham's words, head of Turner Finance, not head of Turner Finance, sorry, worked for the head of Turner Finance, Vicky Miller. His job was to oversee the finances of WCW, and he, in one of his interviews, I think on the last show, talked about how different divisions in Turner Broadcasting would funnel their expenses onto my books. It's called an intercompany allocation, especially towards the end when everybody knew they were going to dump it anyway. So Dave Meltzer likes to talk about all the money that WCW lost. They didn't lose that much money. A lot of other divisions within Turner Broadcasting lost a lot of money, and a lot of those expenses and those losses got allocated into WCW because they knew it was going.
Wow.
That's what companies do. That's called a write-off. Put all of your expenses, every expense you possibly can, if you can justify it, if it's legal. And what Turner Broadcasting was doing was legal. I saw every year we would sit down and go over all the intercompany allocations. Sometimes it was for the positive, sometimes it was for the negative. It was just a finance system, perfectly legal. However, like anything else that's legal, can be abused. And I think towards the end, this is my opinion, towards the end, when the executives in Turner Broadcasting absolutely knew that they were going to be able to get rid of WCW, finally, after years of attempting to do it, because again, according to Teddy Turner, Ted Turner's son, who was also in the documentary, Ted had lost power. Those executives from AOL Time Warner and Turner, who had for years been trying to get rid of WCW, now had a clear path to do so. And knowing they were going to do so 4 months prior to selling it, they started loading expenses from other divisions into WCW's books because they knew it was going to go away. It was all one big write-off. And those other divisions that didn't have to carry those expenses because they got shifted over to my books, they got bonuses. Pretty cool.
Hey, give me for somebody like myself. What do you mean? What would be like an expense that they would lump in, like advertising expense, or like
Sure.
what's an example?
Advertising, marketing, any number of things that they could just come up with as an expense. For example, Turner Home Satellite was one of our pay-per-view providers. Well, if they decide, they're going to allocate 35% of their employee budget to WCW because we do 35% of their revenue, those people don't work for me. I don't fucking need them. I don't even know who they are.
Yeah.
Tell them to stay home. Don't make me pay for them. They don't do shit for me anyway. But that was the way things were set up. That's the way it was set up before I got there. It's the way Turner wanted it set up. Turner Broadcasting wanted it set up that way. Could be advertising, could be marketing. Happened a lot with ad sales. Got killed with allocations from ad sales. On top of the fact that we didn't get any license fee. AEW survives off a license fee. If AEW didn't have a license fee, they'd be making nothing because they wouldn't have pay-per-view. Well, they might have, if they didn't get a license fee for the TV show, but they still aired they wouldn't have been able to afford to air the TV show, but whatever. Yeah. Without TV licensing, WWE wouldn't be wouldn't be at all what we're seeing today. That $5 billion from Netflix never would have happened.
Ooh.
All those hundreds of millions of dollars from USA Network and Fox would have never happened. So what do you think those companies would look like? But that's how WCW was operating. That was the business model that WCW was operating in, and we were still profitable, which is fucking hard to believe, but true.
A couple follow-ups from the live chat. Anthony D wants to know, Eric, do you feel a sense of vindication from Who Killed WCW, showing what it took out of you while the uninformed gave you undeserving blame?
It's a hard question to answer honestly. I feel like, maybe I want to feel like, it's not so much vindication as much as it is, thank God, at least there's a different perspective out there in people that are really interested in making informed decisions and enjoy some level of critical thinking, who are interested in that time. And they should be, because it was an interesting time, not just for WCW, but for the business of the wrestling business. But I think if you're a critical thinking person and you're intellectually curious, at least now there's another perspective from executives from Turner Broadcasting, thanks in no small part to Guy Evans. He's the one that dug these guys up in the first place and wrote the book, which I'm sure inspired a lot of why this docuseries even exists, because now for the first time, there is real, credible information, interviews, and research. Whereas before, all you got was Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez's bullshit.
Greg Jacobson also in the live chat. Since you brought him up, we talked a little bit of Turner. He wants to know, do you still stay in contact with Ted?
No, I haven't talked to Ted in years now. I know, his health is an issue. He's up in Bozeman, which is not too far from me. And I know he's up there a lot in the summer. And I'm going to talk to Teddy, his son, who you saw in the documentary. And if it's practical, I'd love to swing by this summer, because Lori and I are going to be driving right through there in August. For our honeymoon, we're going to leave from Cody, and we're going to throw the dog in a truck and drive up to Missoula, Montana, and hang out with some family and friends there. But we're going to spend the night in Bozeman. So I'm going to talk to Teddy, and if it's appropriate, swing by and pay my respects.
Nice. That'd be a fun little trip. Let's go back to the submitted questions. 1983, Jay Cheat wants to know, do you have any advice for aspiring wrestlers?
That's aspiring wrestling writers.
Oh, right. Wrestling writers. I did skip a big word.
Yeah. I don't really, because it's such a hard business to break into, and there's no one way, there's no easy way, there's no formula that gives you a better shot. It's just like anything else. And Casio, you're a comedian. You've been a comedic writer. You know the business, and I'm sure the answer you would give is similar to the one I'm going to give, which is just keep writing, keep submitting.
Yes.
Keep doing it. Keep your brain working. Write every day. Start thinking about writing in terms of story arcs. Start learning what a story really is. Learn the difference between a wrestling angle and an actual story. Read the book, Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. Do that first. And if you're already a writer, in an established writer, and I'm giving you shitty information, I apologize, but so many people want to write wrestling but don't understand what story even is. And that's where I would start. And then I would just start writing show Bibles. Imagine your own, create your own cast of characters, create those characters, create a character Bible for each one of them, so that you know who each one of those characters are, and then put them in a 6-month story and write that story.
Why start with Hero's Journey? Tell me.
Because it'll teach you the basics of fundamental storytelling.
Okay.
It's just, George Lucas read the book and shortly thereafter came up with Star Wars and credited that book for helping him understand how to tell that story that he had ricocheting around in his head for years. He couldn't figure it out. Read the book, kind of gave him a pathway. And with wrestling, you have to look at, traditional storytelling, act 1, act 2, act 3, all of the plot points along the way that you have to have in order for it to be a legitimate story, right? You have to have those elements. And when you look at those elements and what they mean, maybe for someone who's writing a novel, for example, okay, well, that doesn't apply to wrestling necessarily, but if you start thinking about what does that plot point achieve, what's the goal of that plot point? I know why it's there for if I'm writing a novel, but what do I do with that if I'm writing a wrestling story? Well, think about that device, how that device is being used, and use your imagination, because that always comes in handy, and try to think of a wrestling related beat or moment or point. Words are just words. They're all the same thing. A wrestling related story point that would fit in there. So you do have the appropriate plot points throughout the entire arc, because if you start, you say, okay, I want to write a beginning and a middle and an end. That's an arc. Okay. Got to write a beginning and a middle and an end. Well, the beginning has a purpose. What are you doing in the first act of a book or a TV show or even a fucking TV commercial? You're establishing information. You're telling the audience who the characters are, what their points of view are, what's going through their mind in any particular moment, who they're surrounded with. You're establishing that scene. And somewhere in the middle of Act 1, something is going to happen. It's like a catalyst. It's the first domino that would fall. Something happens that kind of snaps your hero, in this case, out of their normal everyday life and thought pattern into something that they didn't see coming, and begins their journey into the second act. So each act has a purpose, but within each act, you have certain beats along the way that you have to check to make sure that you've got all of the emotion you can possibly get. You've checked all the boxes for that act. And you do the same thing in the second and third act. But if you learn how to do that and think about wrestling in terms of a legitimate storyline, instead of thinking about wrestling like it's a fucking angle and everything has to start off with a, hey, I'm in the ring cutting a promo and somebody comes out and interrupts. We've seen that about 1.5 million times this year. So start thinking about, use your imagination. What else can I do to kind of snatch my hero out of whatever moment he or she is in, thrust him into something unexpected that is the beginning of a new story? Anyway, I could talk for hours about this, and I owe everybody one. We're going to break down what is an Act 1. I'm going to try to get it done this week, if not for sure next week, and talk just for an entire hour or two about what is an Act 1, what are those story points in Act 1 that we need, and how can we imagine those story points within Act 1 from a wrestling-related story as opposed to a novel, an action movie, or something like that. So there you go. I'm sorry I'm talking too much, man.
Oh, I'll ask you about it. So it's Hero's Journey by who?
Joseph Campbell.
Okay. Joseph Campbell, Hero's Journey. Get that if you want to check that out.
Came out in 1943, I think it was.
Wow. And still holds up. That's some knowledge right there. Eric, let's take time out to tell you about our friends over at Babbel. Yeah, that noise is amazing every time. It's the best way to learn a language. Immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Yeah. Look, maybe you're like Mr. Bischoff himself, and you like to use the actual Japanese dialect when you order sushi. Konnichiwa. Maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe you just want to learn how to go to the bathroom when you're over in Spain and you're Italy on your summer trip. Whatever the case may be, maybe you just want to learn Spanish as a second language so you can be more useful in everyday life. If every day got a little bit better, it's thanks to our friends over at Babbel. They make learning easy because you're using conversational pieces. You're not just learning stuff you're never going to use. These 10-minute lessons are designed by over 150 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Designed by real people for real conversation, real life situations on how you're going to use these things you're going to use when you go out and try to use a second language. Babbel is here for you. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Who would have thought where we are in 2024 with our friends at Babbel? And here is a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, you get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for 83 weeks listeners. Go to babbel.com/weeks. That's 55% off at babbel.com/WEEKS. That's spelled out BABBEL.com/weeks. Rules and restrictions may apply, and we appreciate Babbel for sponsoring 83 weeks. All right, let's jump back into the questions. Kane Das Rifle says, if you could, what would you have personally have chosen for a finish at Starrcade 97?
Sting clean.
Sting clean.
That was the plan. 18 months. That was the plan. So, yeah, if I had to do it all over again and everything would have worked according to my plan, our plan, all things considered, everything would have gone smoothly. Yeah, we would have had a clean finish. And the NWO would have probably had to scramble and resurrect and figure out a way to make their comeback.
What David Langley 9597 says, what was the original main event for Starrcade 98 before Kevin Nash became the booker?
I am so sorry. I just can't answer that. I can't even guess. That was a minute ago.
Okay.
God. I can't. I wish I could. I can't even make shit up. That's how far back that was. I can't even make something up. You'd see through that shit in a minute.
Let's see. Jimmy D 9354. Was there any communication between Turner Legal and either Ric Flair or you, Eric, in regards to their legal battle outside the ring?
Are we talking about Rick's legal battle with WCW that I was involved in?
Any communication between Turner Legal and either Ric Flair or Eric in regards to their legal battle outside the ring?
No, I mean, once it gets, just protocol, rules of the road. When you get into a legal situation, somebody's filed notice or intent to file notice, at that point, all the conversation is between the lawyers.
Yeah.
The principals in my case, or Rick in Rick's case, we're instructed, we're threatened. It's made abundantly clear that we are not to talk. The attorneys do all the talking. So we had no communication.
All right. Fightins one says, where did you film that scene in Nitro's opening title sequence with you next to a fireplace? I was always one of my favorite scenes. So creepy for no reason.
Creepy?
That's what he says.
It's my living room. It's a giant stone fireplace with a buffalo head that I named after Ted Turner. It's Ted the Buffalo Head.
Ted the Buffalo.
It's sitting in front of a 125-year-old bar that used to sit at a legitimate bar, a drinking establishment in Hardin, Montana. It's a classic bar. Robert Redford has the only other one in this area. There's one down in a bar called the Palace in Tombstone, Arizona. Only it's much longer than mine, much bigger. But not a lot of them around. But nobody's ever walked in my house and said, "Man, that's creepy." Maybe because all the lights were out and it looked kind of spooky.
Whose idea was that? Do you remember? Yours?
No, I mean, the guys from Dark Side of the Ring have probably been out to my house 15 times and they've shot all over the place. So they knew right where they wanted to shoot when they got here.
Let's see what we got. Anthony B 9226. Eric, I'm moving to Wyoming in September.
Yo!
What's some tips and what should I expect?
Well, that depends. What part? I know, Anthony, if you're listening, maybe you could just jump in a chat here, but what part of Wyoming are you moving to? Because that has a little bit to do with my answer.
What's the differences say?
Well,
North, south, east, west, like that?
Yep, northwest. This is where I live. I live right outside of Yellowstone National Park, about
Mhm.
43 miles. And where I live, I get a lot of wind, very little snow. But if you're down south of me, say down towards Jackson Hole, Wyoming, you can see, I don't even know how much snow they get, but I'm guessing it's in the 30 or 40 feet a year category. They get a ton of snow down there. Their winters are completely different than ours. If you go to the southeast corner of the state, down around Cheyenne, first of all, it's very flat. Wyoming, parts of it are some of the most beautiful parts of this United States. Some of it is just fucking like Mars. And the southern part of the state, the eastern part of the state it's all high desert. It doesn't look any different than northern Arizona. Temperature's different, but it's windy. 40-mile-an-hour winds all day long is normal. So just depends where you're at. If you get up into the northeast section, it's a lot more temperate. Like if you come right across from South Dakota, the Black Hills area into Sundance, Wyoming, maybe before you get to Gillette, Bighorn Mountains, very, very beautiful. And the weather's much more temperate. So it all just depends on where.
We'll jump back in the live chat. Dave McClay, what's up, Dave? He says, Eric, do you believe Bret Hart will ever say anything good about you?
I hope not.
I hope not.
That, because I don't expect him to, and it would ruin my expectations. It would make me realize that I can't read everybody as well as I think I can. Now, look, Brett's one of those people that just loves being miserable. He's got to have somebody to hate. Just look at Brett's commentary over the last 15 years, 20 years. Hated Vince, and he hated Shawn Michaels, and he made up with Vince, and he made up with Shawn Michaels. He hated Ric Flair, made up with Ric Flair, hated this guy, made up with that guy. He's just such a miserable guy. I saw him in Australia a couple of weeks ago, a month ago.
Oh,
And we were friendly. I said hello to his wife. She's very nice lady, beautiful lady, but very pleasant, and no tension or anything. Just, hey, Brett, hey, Eric. That was it. And then I hear him, and he's just so whiny and dark. And I'm not saying this to be a smartass. I really hope he just finds a way to get fucking happy. Like, smile. I'd love to see a picture of Bret Hart. So have you ever seen a picture of Bret Hart with a smile on his face?
no.
I've seen 2 in 28 years. The rest of the time, he looks like he's at a funeral. It's like, what the fuck? You know how basset hounds always look like sad? Bloodhounds, they always just look mopey.
Yeah.
You give them a fucking T-bone steak and they still look mopey. Reminds me of Brett.
He's Eeyore.
It's just, yeah.
He's Eeyore.
Some people love misery.
All right, let's go. What do we got? Johnny Sanders in 4SV. If you were in charge of AEW, what would you do first?
Well, the biggest issue is they don't have an issue with talent, although they have way too much of it. But that's more of a business problem, financial problem. The core of their issue is story first, like really bad. Like the patient's on his way out or her way out, and you got to fix this because from a storyline point of view, that company is bleeding out on the table, and it needs triage. But after I triage the story and what story means for that company and try to explain the vision for the company and what the company really represents, then I would focus on the characters so that they fit into that vision and fit into the type of story. Because right now your characters are all over the map. There's some good ones. Tony Storm is a great character. very mediocre wrestler, but a great character. Well, you can fix the wrestling part. It's a lot easier to get somebody up to speed technically or work around whatever their weaknesses are so that you focus just on the character as much as possible. So there's some great characters there, but there's some that aren't. There's a lot of them that aren't. There's a lot of them that are the same. It's like 75% of that roster looks like they're there to fucking change your tires.
Looks like they're there to change your tires.
I mean, it looked like somebody, if you pull around the back of a Jiffy Lube at lunchtime, everybody was back there smoking a cigarette, having a sandwich. Looks like half the roster. Am I lying, Casio? Am I lying?
No, you're not. It's an interesting looking roster. I'll give you that. Raccoon with rabies, a rabbis, I guess. Wants to know, have you seen anything from Lucha Underground? 4 seasons developed by Robert Rodriguez and Mark Burnett, aired on El Rey Network. There were some great matches, but it was presented as a TV show with over-the-top vignettes giving the viewer cause to suspend belief, akin to how Matt Hardy's cinematic matches would be later. Have you ever seen Lucha Underground?
Yeah, interesting point of fact. You're only going to hear on 83 weeks. I actually had a meeting with Mark Burnett and I think it was Robert Rodriguez and his wife. Could be wrong. They flew me out to LA to talk to me about coming in and working with him on that show.
Wow.
And I was kind of interested because it was such a unique idea. And this is before they shot the first show. So they were explaining to me what they were hoping to achieve. They hadn't shot a sizzle reel or a demo tape or anything yet at that point. It was early. And I really liked the idea of it. And I was pretty interested. I wasn't committed to it. They didn't make the offer either. My interest is really more in working with Mark Burnett than it was working on that show. I was interested in the show because it was unique and different. And I would have probably gotten involved to some degree just because I wanted to see if it was possible to pull it off. But the opportunity to work for Mark Burnett was something that Mark and I almost worked together on 1 or 2 other projects. We had a reality show that I developed with Jason Hervey for Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon signed on. He was attached to it. And we had all the other components that we needed to pull it off. And Mark was going to jump in on that with us, but that deal fell apart at Fox at the very last minute because of NASCAR complications.
Wow. Of course, everybody should know Mark Burnett's resume is insane.
Yeah, he's like he's the Barry Gordy of reality television. Survivor,
The Apprentice, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Tons more, but just absolute iconic shows. Yeah, would have been cool to see you work. Everybody wants to work with him. That'd be awesome. Instagram, a wrestling historian wants to know, how would you have booked a Bret Hart versus Hulk Hogan match at Halloween Havoc 99? Thanks in advance.
Oh, I'd have had Hogan beat Bret Hart like a fucking drum. Pillar to fucking post.
And then have Reese come out and try to butt fuck you.
You got to finish it off right. You got to give the people what they want.
Give them a call back. It always works.
Wouldn't it be funny if you just, if you were crazy enough? Like, just imagine, for example, you were, the son of a billionaire, and it didn't really matter if you made any money or not. You could just do whatever whimsical shit you wanted to do.
Sure.
If it just struck you, like, you're sitting on a toilet taking a shit in the morning before you go to work. Hey, I got an idea. We could just go do this because this is what I think would be fun. And it really wouldn't matter if people watched it or not, as long as you were having fun because, you're a billionaire's kid. You can do whatever the fuck you want.
Sure.
But what if that was like you or I and we were booking a thing and we were sitting around having some fun, maybe a cocktail. We said, hey, I got an idea. Let's have Ron Reese jump out. He dress him up as a mummy. And just every once in a while, randomly, have him come out and try to like hump somebody in the ring and then take off out through the crowd. And for no reason. It's kind of like the 24/7 title. Oh, we'd have Ron Reese dressed like a mummy. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
People will be talking about that forever. You do it in
Dress
Japan,
up
we
like a
get
mummy.
stars and shit.
Oh my gosh. Let's do that. Let's do it. I'm in. If that's the case, I'm in.
I mean, no, you'd only do that if you were a billionaire's kid, and it didn't matter if you made any money. Because
Sure.
you could just say, no, I'm just booking for the sickos. I don't care if you guys want to watch. Hey, I don't care if nobody's watching my show. I don't care if people aren't buying tickets to come to see me produce my A show on Wednesday nights. 3,000-4,000 people, who cares? As long as there's more than 4 or 5, I don't care. Because they'll go, this is awesome. As long as they can go, I'm good. I'm good. Forget about the money. I got all the money I need. Let's have some fun.
Let's have some fun. The Slash Tracks Network says, Eric, what was your initial reaction to WWE's locker room compared to WCW's? Do you think showing you backstage on camera before the reveal you were the new GM was a mistake that took some of the shock and awe from the reveal itself?
Yeah, that's a point. It's an argument. It's a good one. It's probably the one that I gravitate towards. But the other side of it is, and I'm not sure there's any absolutely correct answer. I think both answers are good answers. But one school of thought is just surprise, shock the shit out of people.
Yeah.
I kind of like that one. But the other one is by walking me out and revealing me and then walking me through the crowd and getting the reaction from the talent in the locker room, because that was pretty good. There's some great reactions. To see those reactions right before a 3-minute, 2.5 or 3-minute commercial break creates a little bit of buzz and gets people who may not be tuning in to tune in. Now it's incremental. It's not going to be major, but it's incremental. It matters. Numbers matter. So I see both arguments, but I probably would have thrown caution to the wind and said, fuck it. I'm just going to do it the way I want to do it because that's what my gut tells me to do. And I would have probably just shocked as opposed to teased.
All right, let's jump in the live chat. PJ's got another question. WWE is a pay-per-view, maybe didn't work because of the TVs at the time. Do you think with everyone having 55 and 65-inch TVs nowadays, maybe it could work?
Say that again. I didn't hear that.
World War III pay-per-view.
Oh.
He was saying maybe it didn't work because of the TVs. You think everybody has a huge TV now? Would that make a difference?
No, it's just too much going on. It's just too many bodies in the ring, too much, and it looks horrible. I mean, battle royals look like shit anyway, in my opinion. Guys got standing around looking for somebody to hit. I mean, I've been in some shitty bar fights before, and I've never been in a bar fight that looks as bad as a battle royal. It look horrible. And yeah, 60 people just walking around going, okay, who am I supposed to punch next? Oh, you're standing there. You're not doing anything. Okay, you punch me, I'll punch you. Okay, I'm going to go walk over here and get punched. I just fucking hate it. There's nothing about it. Look, wrestling's not supposed to be logical. If you sit around and you're trying to apply a logic to professional wrestling, then you're a fucking moron. Just go bang your head on a curb somewhere. Because there's no reason to do it. Just like there's no reason to apply logic to an action movie because none of that shit's real either. Just fun to watch. So don't apply logic to it. Oh, there's no way that Mercedes 600 SL could take a corner that fast. Fucking kidding me. And people watch wrestling the same way. Get a job.
There's no way, absolutely zero chance that a mummy comes out and tries to butt fuck me at any point during the show.
Well, I've been to parties where, never mind.
Let's keep it going. Kind of based on what we were talking about, I'm going to stay in the live chat. Airborne 37th hit us up and said, Do you think there's a lack of certain types of life experiences that have maybe turned some wrestling into gymnastics? Maybe a lack of getting into fights when you're young or military services. Point being, how can you have a fake fight if you were never in a real one?
There are, I've known people throughout the decades that have subscribed to that theory. I don't think that's it. I just think the style. I think video games has probably had more of an impact on the presentation of wrestling than any other one thing, including lack of street fighting ability or experience. I bet, by the way, go over on Twitter, Twix as I call it. Search for Steve Inman, Inman. He gets these clips.
Voiceovers?
Yeah, he does voiceovers, but he does
great.
these he's a sports guy, MMA guy. And he does these voiceovers. He takes these clips of guys in street fights or women in street fights, whatever the case may be, and they're just fucking ridiculous. And then he does a play-by-play over it. It's funny as hell. But you watch these people, these street fights, there's none of that's applicable in real life either.
No.
I mean, these people are fucking horrible. It's a wonder anybody gets hurt in a street fight. Now, there are some good street fighters. I'm not suggesting there aren't, but the vast majority of the garbage that you see on social media, these people shouldn't be swatting flies, more or less picking fights with other human beings. So, no, I don't think that's it. I just think, everything changes. Music changes, fashion changes, everything, tastes change, people change. And I think over the years, probably starting with the cruiserweights and guys that had so much influence like Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, all the luchadors that we brought over, and we brought them over consistently. I wasn't the first person to do it. Paul Heyman did it, ECW. Paul Heyman didn't create a cruiserweight division and commit to it and bring people in from all over the world on a weekly basis, whereas I did. But I think establishing that cruiserweight division and establishing that smaller guys with a much different style, a guy who's 5'10", 5'9", and 180 pounds can do a lot of things that a guy who's 6'8" and 340 can't, just visually. And I think when we brought those guys in, and intentionally, that was the goal. That was the reason I brought them in. It's the reason I created the cruiserweight division, is to have that different, fast-paced style and presentation. That had so much influence over the years that a lot of younger, smaller guys that weren't 6'6" and 250 pounds went, hey, I can maybe I can be the next Eddie Guerrero. Maybe I can be the next Rey Mysterio. Maybe I can be the next Dean Malenko. And all of a sudden, you've got a lot smaller guys that are capable of doing much more visually dynamic things. And all of a sudden now, everybody's trying to do those visually super dynamic things, high risk offense. I think that's changed, that and video games. I just think video games and the quality of the action and play design that you see in video games, that kind of sets an expectation in a way. And now you're watching live action on television, and to me, it kind of makes sense that younger kids that grew up watching really cool action in video games are now getting an opportunity to see that same live action or something kind of similar to it with real people inside of a wrestling ring. Mm-hmm. So I understand the evolution of it. My only bitch with it is that it's all being done at the expense of story. So much focus on the physicality and the incredible athleticism that guys like Will Ospreay and others bring to the ring, because they can do some amazing shit. It's just amazing shit that doesn't really mean much in the context of a story, in the context of emotion. It means a lot in terms of an audience going, oh my gosh, did you see that? That was so cool. I've never seen that before. That's not the same thing as creating emotion. But that's a discussion about the art of the business versus the presentation of it.
Yeah. All right. Back to our questions. Let's see what we got here. Mr. PL Luke says, Eric, while in 1999 WCW had a lot of changes in logos and presentations, belts did not get changed. Why was that? He says he saw a few Jmar concepts with the new belts. Why never accepted?
I don't really know. Other than to say that it wasn't the priority it perhaps should have been. That's an honest answer.
Okay. Just didn't feel the need, so it wasn't a dire need.
There was a ton of needs for a ton of shit every single day, but the belts were probably in the top 10, but not in the top 5. And when you look at where WCW came from, beginning in 1995, 94, really, and where we ended up in 2000, that was a motherfucking treadmill. Every day was a treadmill. So there were a lot of things that I wish we could have paid more attention to, and perhaps we should have paid more attention to, like the belts, that really just weren't the priority because of the velocity that WCW was growing through, or growing at, I should say.
Eric, the weather is beautiful. What's the weather like up there right now?
72, 74, sunny, 0 humidity and no wind. It's just glorious.
We just got a little bit of a heat wave. It's supposed to hit 90 here, but still skies are clear, humidity not bad. And that means skies out, thighs out, baby. Summer is here, and our friends at Chubby's are bringing the good vibrations, baby. Boy, good vibrations. What a word that is. Our friends Chubby's have discovered there. Chubby's is the lifestyle apparel brand that makes every moment feel like a vacation. They say fashion is an expression of one's character, so why not let the world know you're down for a good time? Chubby's offers a variety of high-quality men's apparel, from super stretchy shorts and swim trunks in 3 short inseam lengths to pants, polos, and button-down shirts for when you need to hit up your favorite weekend brunch spot. Embrace the spirit of endless summer with Chubby's, the ultimate destination for bold, vibrant, and outrageously comfortable clothing. And for a limited time, Chubby's is giving our listeners 20% off your order with our exclusive code. Use code 83weeks at chubbysshorts.com. Eric, I was surprised. I knew Chubby's had the swim trunks going on. Did not know till I went recently to chubbysshorts.com that they had all of that stuff. They've got you covered from head to toe, man.
I know. And I just put in my order the other day. I should
you?
have it by this time next week. So when I sit down, I'm going to get up and show off my chubby shorts.
Tune in next week to 83 Weeks when
You're
Eric
not going to want to miss it,
shows off
ladies
his
and gentlemen.
Chubbies.
You're not going to want to miss it.
That will be Chubby's presented on next 83 Weeks. You heard it here first. Here's the cool part, man. They just look cool. These are not just ordinary shorts. Everybody knows that stretch material. They're comfortable, but they just look cool. Look at all the colors and it's just a cool looking short, man.
I like those pink ones in the back with the pattern.
What'd you get? Did you get those pink ones?
No, I didn't get those, but I'm looking at those now and I'm kind of digging them.
A little fish on them.
Yeah, they look good on me.
Those swimsuits feature a lightweight anti-chafe liner to protect your boys for all beach season. Like I mentioned, go to chubbysshorts.com and you'll see they got the Friday shirts. You are cooking with gas, man. You pair that with the original stretch shorts of the Chubby's lineups, casual button-downs, retro-inspired prints. These shirts are perfect for whatever you're doing. Kicking back with a cold one, hitting town with friends. You got to check it out over at chubbysshorts.com. So whether you're getting dressed for your work day, a workout, or a weekend getaway, Chubby's has you covered. And like we mentioned, for a limited time, Chubby's is giving 83 Weeks viewers and listeners 20% off your order with the code 83weeks at chubbysshorts.com. That's code 83weeks at chubbysshorts.com. Support our show and tell them we sent you. Don't blend in with the crowd. Stand out with Chubby's. Thanks, Chubby's, for always supporting us here at 83 Weeks heading into the summer season. All right, Eric, we'll jump back in it. Dr. Adam K wants to know, one of the most iconic moments in WCW history was when Goldberg defeated Hogan at the Georgia Dome. You've often explained why this match happened on Nitro instead of pay-per-view, but why was the building itself booked to host a Nitro instead of pay-per-view? Was there a specific reason why we never saw a pay-per-view emanate from the Georgia Dome?
Not really. Scheduling, perhaps. Atlanta had been pretty good, was really good for WCW by 96, 97, 98. But prior to that, WCW really struggled back when it was the Omni in WCW. Now, prior to, 92, 93, there were some good houses in the Omni. I'm not saying wrestling didn't work there, but WCW didn't work in Atlanta for a long time. And I think we just started having so much success in other cities. It wasn't like, producing in Atlanta was any kind of cost-effective opportunity because 90% of your talent, a lot of your freelancers, everybody else, they don't live in Atlanta anyway.
Oh.
So it wasn't that cost-effective, to be honest. And we just did really well in a lot of other outside markets, so there was less risk.
All right. Dyslexic Chaos wants to know, Eric, what was your favorite song to come out to, and why was it White Train?
Because I love that movie with Antonio Banderas. I can't remember the name of the movie now. Fuck. Desperado.
Oh, yeah.
With Antonio Banderas. I love that music. I love the scene. The first time I heard that music in the scene, it was like, whoa, someday I'm going to do something with that music. A couple of years later, I'm thinking, hey, I need some theme music. I like that. I like the drums. It's got a good beat.
All right, this goes back to a little bit earlier when we were just wishing we were a billionaire's kid. Nothing mattered. But TTC 2234 said if WWE needed or wanted to sell WCW rights in library, would you buy it, bring it back, and run the company as owner if you could afford it? Also, another question, would you work for another billionaire startup that wants you to run the company completely? Do you think you can assemble a roster in either of these scenarios and surpass AEW? I think you could, and we'll be excited to see one last run, either on-screen character with WWE or a new company running a show.
Whew.
A lot there.
There's.
Would you buy the WCW library if you could afford it and it was up for sale?
No.
Okay.
No.
If a billionaire wants you to run his company completely, would you do it?
No.
Okay. If you were forced to do it, do you think you could assemble a roster in either of those scenarios to surpass AEW?
In a heartbeat.
Oh, okay.
In a heartbeat. Because again, it's not a talent issue. It would be so easy for if somebody were to come along and say, here, go start a wrestling company. The last thing you to do is even think about WWE, but you could snatch AEW market share and momentum in 90 days. It'd be
90 days. Wow.
It would be so easy. It'd be so easy. I mean, it's not, they're just that bad. They are just that bad. It would be so easy to put on a product that would be so much better and noticeably so immediately.
If you did have one last run, would you rather it be on-screen character or running a company behind the scenes?
If I had a chance to do an on-screen character that was fun and different, not the, evil general manager stuff that I've done, and I'm grateful for every second of it, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But just, I don't want to do that again. But if it was something that was a little fresh, different that I hadn't done before, a character that was a bit of a stretch for me, that would challenge me, I think that would be fun. But I wouldn't want any kind of management position.
All right. Greg Dale 9472. Who do you think is the best seller of all time? I've been rewatching some of the late 80s, early 90s, and it was amazing seeing how good Rick Rude and Sergeant Slaughter were at selling. They weren't flying around like a Hennig or Ziggler, but they made every move that they took look like it had impact.
Randy Orton.
Randy's great.
Shawn Michaels, Randy Orton. I'm going to go Randy Orton, but it's close. And to me, that's the magic. That is, if there's one thing that if I was coaching wrestling or working with somebody, a friend or family member, that I would just beat them over the head with to the point where they were sick of hearing it, is to learn how to sell. Study Razor Ramon, study Scott Hall. Scott was amazing. Sometimes more amazing than others, but always amazing. Randy Orton, like I said, I don't think there's anybody wrestling today that's even in his universe when it comes to selling. Shawn Michaels right behind him. As far as anybody else today, I'm sure there are. I'll just leave it. I'll leave it at those choices now because I'm inevitably going to leave somebody out that I shouldn't. But selling is everything, man. You can learn the rest of it. If you can sell, because if you can sell really, really well, what you're really doing is making your opponent. And that's how you make yourself valuable. That's how everybody wants to work with you. Because you've got offense, you've got a promo, but when you sell, you're making your opponent look like $1 million. You're getting the audience to engage emotionally. They're not sitting back like Pavlov's dogs going, "This is awesome." They're actually engaged emotionally, which is the whole goal behind presenting this kind of drama in the first place, the conflict and the drama of a good guy and a bad guy, or a good girl and a bad girl, whatever. Fuck, just stick with me, people. It's that good versus evil dynamic that's at the center of the story. And then when you've got someone like a Randy Orton who's up there and he's facing this monster that's trying to put him out, and Randy's selling it and he's getting the audience emotionally involved so that when he makes his comeback, it matters. It's really simple shit, but it all comes down to story. And that's the part that would be so easy to demonstrate to AEW fans so clearly that it needs to be done and should be done. Just put a product up there that is completely different than AEW's, a new one, because everybody's going, yeah, but WWE this, yeah, but WWE that. Just take a brand new company and get a half-ass decent roster, but get a good story, get some strong characters, and let people watch it for a couple of weeks. That'd be fun.
That's fascinating. It's fun to hear you talk about, Randy Orton, being a fan of his, knowing his career and how long he's been doing it at a high level. I think the more I've got into this podcasting space and the wrestling world, meeting people and interacting with people in the business like yourself and many others. I mean, doing the podcast with Road Dogg, he says, quote, Randy Orton's the best television wrestler there's ever been. And I think it goes back to that point of being able to do everything for television the right way and correctly, selling, promo, in-ring, like just hearing everybody in the business, everybody I meet that's worked with him or interacted or even just watched has nothing but incredible thing. I think that makes me appreciate him even more.
And me too. I mean, the older I get, the more I really begin to understand and think through what works, and more importantly, why it works. It all comes down to emotion. That part of your brain, the amygdala, that's where emotion happens. That's where you feel happiness and sadness and all the human emotions. So it's right there, kind of at the core of your brain. And that's why people watch wrestling. That's why people go to movies. That's why people read books. They're looking for that emotional response. Wrestling is no different, despite the fact that Tony fucking Khan thinks it is. And Will Ospreay is convinced it is. It's not. You guys are focused on what trips your individual triggers, and you're neglecting the fact that 99% of the rest of the world out there that aren't your sickos and who are only interested in the physical display inside of the ring, the vast majority of the audience is looking for an emotional experience, and you're not going to get there unless you've got talent that understands how to tell a story in the ring. And like Randy Orton and Shawn Michaels and Scott Hall and Ric Flair know how and when to sell.
All right, let's jump back in the live chat, get some questions from there. Brian Lestat says, who came up with the idea of Little Nate?
Couldn't tell you. Just kind of popped up. I think it was one of those things that started happening as a rib back in the locker room because Charles looked so much like Rick, and you know, he just adored Rick. You know, he just looked up to Rick so much and was kind of like his shadow. Probably started out like anything else as kind of a rib and a joke backstage, and then all of a sudden became a wrestling thing.
All right. Derry in Wotherspoon, 1320 says, I've seen a number of interviews from Bret Hart where he has nothing but nice things personally to say about Eric personally prior to his stroke. Even Goldberg, he didn't harbor any ill feelings too. You could see some shoots before 2002, he says. Do you think his stroke has perhaps affected his perspective on things, as it seems more personal now than just professional differences? Obviously, brain injuries can affect your mood and memories, and I'm a Bret guy. So it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, just always negative these days.
Could be. It could be the result of the concussion. Could be just frustration.
Yeah.
My dad, going to a little bit of story here. My dad was born prematurely. He weighed 3.5 pounds when he was born in 1930.
Wow.
He was born on a farm, premature as he was. They kept him in a dresser drawer and they kept him warm with a light bulb, and he survived. And he, very physical guy, loved to hunt, loved to fish. He was in great shape. Joined the Army, got out of the Army, got married. I'm born. My dad's 25. A couple years after I'm born, my dad's getting debilitating headaches, horrible, horrible headaches. Found out that because he was born premature and because he was born so premature, that his spine never fully developed up near the base of the spine. And there was a hole in his spine, in the bone, where that was part of his cervix, or not his cervix, whatever the bone is there. And it would fill up with cerebral fluid. And then that cerebral fluid would put pressure on the spinal cord, and my dad's hands would get numb and tingly, and he'd get these freaking horrible headaches. Obviously, I was too young to remember all that. I found out much later. So my dad went in to get brain surgery. And by the way, my dad was a happy, fun guy. Like I said, very physical, very, very active, life of the party kind of guy. 27 years old, he goes in to get this neck thing fixed. But in order to get to it, they had to get into his brain. Long story short, in the process of that brain surgery, they destroyed the nerves in his fingers, in his hands, and for the most part, his arms. So he had no use of his hands or his arms. So if you could imagine somebody going into the hospital, a physical, athletic, hunt, fish, hang out with your buddies, drink beer, all that good fun stuff, had a good job, and then come out, you can't even brush your own teeth. And oh, by the way, that's in the 1960s. So my reason for telling you this story is because it's one of the reasons why when I hear Bret speak and he says horrible things about me or anybody else, it doesn't bother me at all. I don't take it personally, because I think, having seen what my dad went through, to have something taken away from him, his self-esteem, when my dad had to get up every morning and my mother had to dress him so that he could go to work and tie his shoes for him. Wow. He couldn't brush his own teeth or comb his own hair. That took a lot out of my dad, and my dad became a very bitter, resentful person. And he took it out on everybody around him, myself included, my mom in particular. So when I see someone like Bret, who did have a lot taken away from him. Whether it was his fault, Goldberg's fault, nobody's fault, doesn't matter. His life, the most important part of his life at that point, or one of the most important parts of Bret's life, was snatched away from him. And he's bitter, and he's angry, and he's resentful. I wish he wouldn't be. I wish he could find a way to get over that and not carry those bags of bitterness and anger and resentment around with him, because they're not going to do him any good, just like they don't do me any good or anybody else. But until Bret decides to drop those bags of bitterness and resentful feelings towards certain people, he's going to stay the same. He's going to be Bret. And perhaps it is the brain injury, or perhaps it's just human nature. He feels like his career was cut short, and it was unfulfilled, and I'm sure it was.
All right, we'll jump back in the live chat. Jerry,
wasn't that cheerful? Fuck. How'd we get on? I just wanted people to understand why I feel the way I feel, as opposed to just, that's how I feel. So there you go. First-hand experience.
I was thinking of how I would have answered that the same way. It's just, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell, but also, yes, like you said, it's people change after surgery. Some people change after surgery. A lot of people change after surgeries, and you never know what they're going through there. And he's dealing with it however he thinks he should deal with it. Jerry O'Sullivan in the live chat wants to know, we saw Mrs. B on the last Who Killed WCW episode. Was there ever a time when you thought about using her on television? Maybe when you and Garrett had your feud in TNA?
No, she would have had no interest in that. She just, no. Now, if I would have suggested it, it would have been, she probably would have done it, but she would have been happy about it.
All right. Let me tell you this, Eric. If you blink right now, if you haven't purchased a Father's Day gift yet, yep, that's me. We thought so. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. Maybe your pops has had a bush since the 70s, and that's okay. Our friends at Manscaped have crafted the total package for his special day, whether it's for the boys downstairs, his beard, or even the best pair of underwear out there. Manscaped has his bases covered. Head over to manscaped.com and get 20% off and free shipping with code 83weeks. From daddy to zaddy, trust Manscaped, Eric. Are you a zaddy?
What is a zaddy? I don't know what a zaddy is.
What is a zaddy? A sexually attractive man, especially an older one who is fashionable or charismatic.
Oh, all day long on that.
That's right. You're a zaddy. One of the reasons is because of Manscaped.
Yeah. My junk is clean, aerodynamic.
Dynamic.
If I have to run in the wind, nothing's going to slow me down.
Look, guys, if you're not worried, if you don't want to talk to your dad about actual manscaping downstairs, man, still go to Manscaped. That old beard trimmer your dad's been using since you were a kid, it's time for an upgrade. So introducing the face shaver that's a must-have for that smooth finish that dad loves, the Manscaped Handyman. Powerful and compact, this face shaver isn't just for home use. It's perfect for quick touch-ups on the go. Its precision blades ensure a clean shave every time, making it an essential tool for any dad's grooming routine. If your dad prefers rocking a scruffier beard, then the Beard Hedger Pro Kit is the ultimate beard maintenance kit for him. This all-in-one kit includes the Beard Hedger, Manscaped's most advanced beard trimmer, along with shampoo, conditioner, oil, and balm for his beard. It also comes with a brush, comb, and scissors so he can style his beard and mustache like a true gent. And with summer just around the corner, the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the perfect gift for him. Designed with hairy daddies in mind, it features the signature Lawnmower 5.0 for all his grooming needs. And while you're upgrading his grooming tools, don't forget about his underwear drawer. The set of underwear he got for Christmas a decade ago most definitely needs an upgrade. Thankfully, Manscaped's Boxers 2.0 are here to help. The Boxers 2.0 were crafted with simple mission to be the most comfortable boxers a man can buy. And what makes these bad boy difference? The jewel pouch, a dedicated space that cradles your stones in place with a perforated performance fabric for extra breathability. Get 20% off and free shipping with code 83weeks at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code 83weeks. Never forget where you came from, if you know what I mean. Happy Father's Day from Manscaped and everyone here at 83 weeks. Isaac Winston said, you've been a zaddy longer than you've been a daddy.
Isaac Risson, our Grammy Award winning composer, musician here. Thank you, Isaac. Yeah, I've been working this zaddy gimmick for a while.
Maybe you wanted a character you could lean into if you ever made one last run, the zaddy character.
To daddy.
Daddy to zaddy is him. Let's jump back in it. Let's see what we got here. Dizzy B says, in WCW, was your attitude towards the business, I'm probably going to do this until I retire, or were you just trying to make it to next week? What is the psyche of a newly in charge Bischoff?
I didn't think about retirement. I just thought about the goal. You know, when I was hired as executive producer and then made vice president, I had a very clear goal. My job was to make $1 a profit. I was told when I was hired as executive producer that if WCW didn't turn around and show a profit, that Ted Turner was going to pull the plug. That was in 1993.
Wow.
So everything that I thought about with regard to WCW was all about turning that profit until we did. And then it was growing the company. So I never really thought about how I wanted, if I was going to stick around for 3 years or 10 years or 40 years or whatever. I didn't think about it at all. I just thought about the goal.
SG Busby wants to know, I remember Eric mentioning that talent had a number of appearances on their contracts that affected how often they can be used on TV. This became more troublesome with Thunder being introduced and booking talent on that. My question is, knowing what you know now, do you think a draft split, half the talent on Nitro, the other half on Thunder, would have helped in that situation? WCW at the time had a lot of wrestlers under contract, so it could have been possible. Thank you, Eric and Conrad, for 83 weeks, and take care.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have done necessarily a draft, but the whole idea behind Thunder and our approach to Thunder was to have NWO have Monday night, WCW have Thursday night. So in effect, you would have two separate rosters. In essence, a brand split or a draft type of scenario.
Mm-hmm.
That was the original goal until things went batshit.
Brandon Williams, 56-13, with hindsight being as it is, how should Goldberg have been booked leading up to and after Starrcade 98 if there were a way to erase the whole finger poke of doom debacle? Was Nash the right guy at the right time to end the streak at that Starrcade, or should Goldberg have continued this stretch of mowing guys down well into 99?
No, I agree with Kevin Nash. You know, when we heard him in the interview, there's just no way Bill Goldberg was going to be able to maintain the momentum that he'd been able to maintain up until that point by going out and having squash matches. There was no one left to fucking squash.
Yeah.
Who was he going to start squashing? The guy selling hot dogs in the stands? You know, the grips pulling cable backstage. I mean, there was no one left. He went through the entire fucking roster. The only people left would have been the guys at the very top. Are we going to destroy the entire top of the roster so Bill Goldberg doesn't have to learn how to wrestle? That's harsh, but that's where we were at. Bill had just squeezed every ounce of value out of that Goldberg character at that point that we possibly could. It was time for Bill to be able to get into a match that would be more give and take. Instead of it being 80-20 Bill, it had to be more 50-50, 60-40, 70-30 at least. We had to see more depth in Bill's character. And for anybody to suggest, oh, you should have just kept beating people because everything would have been better. If you wouldn't have done the finger poker doom, Bill Goldberg would have still been squashing guys. WCW would still be here today. I mean, there's so much of that Dave Meltzer bullshit floating around out there that I can't take too much of it seriously. But if you go back and you just look at the reaction to Bill's matches, you still had Pavlov's dogs out there, people reacting because they'd seen Bill do it so many times on TV and they know their job is to stand up and cheer on Bill. There was still a lot of that, and that's very valuable. I'm not dismissing it. But there's a point. There's a limit to how much you can continue to do that before you start losing that audience. And here's the trick, folks. You want to know you're losing audience before the audience knows they're being lost. You can't wait until, wow, looks like 50% of the people that used to support Goldberg aren't supporting him anymore. Maybe it's time we take him off the streak. You've already lost. You've got to be able to, as Dusty Rhodes would say, you've got to get off that lightning bolt and onto another one before the one you were on hits the ground. If you're going to ride that fucker into the ground like I did with the NWO, you're going to get what you're going to get. Part of the success for a lot of characters like Bill who are new and green, and look at what WWE's doing. Look, for example, Jay Cargill. They could have brought her in there and just shoved her down everybody's throat, and she could have dominated for a short period of time, but she doesn't have the repertoire. She's not comfortable enough yet. She doesn't have the experience or the reps yet. So they're managing it. They're not putting her, she's in a tag, so the spotlight isn't on her. And they're letting her get her legs underneath her, so to speak, her wrestling legs, so that she's got more of a repertoire that she's very comfortable with. That's where Bill was. Bill needed to learn how to go out there and have different types of matches that require different types of skill sets, including learning how to sell, because you can't have matches with other top talent if you're not really good at selling. That doesn't work for very long. So no, I think we made it. Look, could things have been different? Could it have done better? Could we have done a different opponent? Perhaps. Is there anybody more believable than Kevin Nash? Who else was going to possibly beat Bill Goldberg on that roster? Think about it. Just physically matching them up, two guys standing in the ring. You've got to bet your last $100 bill on who's going to win. Who's going to put money on anybody other than Kevin Nash at that point? I mean, visually, in order for the audience to suspend their disbelief, you got to give them a fucking reason to. You're going to put Bill Goldberg in there with somebody that's, half his size and soft and mushy and doesn't look like he could run a half a mile and expect to get a match out of him, or somebody that's just jacked up and big but doesn't know how to work. It won't work that way. It's fun to talk about, but it doesn't work. Nope, I don't hear you, buddy. No audio.
There we go. Ghostface 1393 wants to know, how do you manage telling the truth while still being loyal to a fault?
I don't know. You can say that hard. You can be honest with somebody without being mean. You can be honest with somebody without trying to hurt them. So if I'm loyal to somebody, and if I see something that I think is bad for them, or perhaps will hurt them in some way down the road, or perhaps is not the best decision, if you're really loyal, you kind of owe it to whoever it is you're loyal to say, hey, you might want to think about this. If you're really a friend, and if they're really a friend, they're not going to take it personally.
Yeah.
It's not that hard, really.
Zim Flims said, hypothetical what if question, WCW was winning the Monday Night Wars for 83 weeks. Eric, do you think you would back then, would you have accepted a sit down with WWF Vince to stop the war as they were on the brink of bankruptcy? Or do you think back then you were so focused on wanting to put them out of business at any cost, you would not have done that?
No, of course I would have. Of course I would have. Look, a lot of and I did say it. I think I said I wanted to drive a financial stake through the heart of Vince McMahon. That's pretty clear. No ambiguity in that one, right? And I did say things similar to that. Part of that was just me trying to pump up the people around me to feel as aggressive as I was. I was focused. I was obsessed with being number one. I was obsessed with making the first dollar of profit that WCW ever made. I achieved that. I was obsessed with being competitive with WWE, mostly because I had a gun to my head and I had to be. But I was obsessed with that. I was obsessed with turning WCW into a major profit center and being the number one wrestling company in the world. I achieved that. So part of my job was to try to keep people around me as obsessed as I was, which wasn't that easy. And sometimes I went overboard in doing it and sort of making references to putting WWE out of business because that was never really my intent. I wasn't concerned about it. Didn't keep me up at night, but it wasn't my goal. My goal was to be number one. And if me becoming number one meant WWE had to shut the doors, then that was just fine too. But it was never the goal.
Let's sneak in another question from our live chat. I want to make sure we get some of those in before we get out of here. We got a few more questions submitted as well. Anthony D has a good question. He said, Eric, have you tried to get Dr. Sean Baker on to do an episode of Wise Choices with you being on the carnivore diet?
You know, I bought Sean Baker's book. I've exchanged a couple Twitter exchanges with him. He did let me know if I had any questions, I could reach out to him. And I have thought about having him on Wise Choices. I may, because I get a lot of questions about the carnivore diet. And I tell everybody, I am not an expert. I am learning. I read every single day. I follow Sean Baker. I listen to him. I listen to him on podcasts. I listen to him on Joe Rogan. I search him out whenever he's doing interviews on other people's podcasts, because Dr. Sean Baker, first of all, he's a surgeon, doctor surgeon, 54 years old. He's been on the carnivore diet for 8 years. So it's not like a new thing for him. And because he is a doctor, kind of knows how to research stuff. Oh, and by the way, he's a competitive athlete. He's a competitive rower, and he owns a bunch of rowing records. So he kind of knows his shit. And I would love to have him on the show. My only hesitation is enough people interested in hearing about this kind of conversation. Most of the people that listen here are listening because they want to hear me talk about wrestling. But I am so fascinated with what Sean knows and other people like Sean. I've got another friend of mine that's very, very, very active in the regenerative meat industry, and for a whole lot of reasons. I'm thinking about having him on too, to talk about, where we get our food and what's happening to our food chain and our food supply, and what's it going to look like a year from now or 6 months from now or 2 years from now. To me, this is fascinating stuff, but I'm also afraid that 98% of my audience is going to go, what the fuck is he talking about hamburgers for? I don't know. Maybe.
Well, I'm all in. I ask you about it every time. I am fascinated about it.
Yeah, well, I'll see if I can get Sean Baker on. He's kind of a high-profile guy in his world. He's a very high-profile guy, but seems like a really down-to-earth good guy. And, when he talks about the carnivore diet, his book is explained so someone like me, who's not a nutritionist, not a doctor, just somebody who's really, really interested in being healthy. His book is excellent. It's not only information, it's motivation, inspiration too. It's a really good book. But yeah, I'd love to have him on. It'd be fun.
Eric, if you're wanting to have fun and you need a little extra help, how about our friends at Blue Chew? That's right. This episode sponsored proudly by our friends at Blue Chew. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Guys, remember the days when you're always ready to go? Now you can increase your performance and get that extra confidence in bed. You know what it is. BlueChew.com. Yeah. They are the man, the myth, the legend when it comes to helping us out. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever the opportunity arises. Blue Chew, look, You've already talked about it, Eric. You are streamlined, ready to go, and running the wind whenever you need to. Blue Chew's there for you.
It is my go-to, especially like Saturday and Sunday mornings, because that's my special time. Like I plan it out the night before, set my
Okay.
alarm. I plan everything out. I know exactly when to take that Blue Chew right before I get into the shower. By the time I pop that Blue Chew, I jump into the shower, take care of business, use my Manscaped equipment, make sure everything's nice and trim, streamlined. By the time I dry off, I come out of the bathroom. I walk into the main part of the bedroom. And Mrs. B's looking at me because she knows. She knows I went in there and hit that Blue Chew. She just gets a smile on her face, puts her cup of coffee down, and just knows Saturday morning in the Bischoff household is always a fun time. Thanks to Blue Chew.
You heard it from the Zaddy himself, baby. That's what it's like about being a Zaddy. Maybe you're sitting there asking, does it work? He just told you it works. Maybe you're thinking you don't need to try it. We say try it a month try it free for a month, and you're going to see that you are going to love it. You could be missing out on the best sex of your life. Blue Chew wants to help you have that better sex. Discover your options at bluechew.com. Chew it and do it. And of course, we've got a special deal for 83 weeks. Listeners, try Blue Chew free when you use the promo code 83 weeks at checkout. You just pay $5 shipping. That's bluechew.com. Promo code 83 weeks to receive your first month free. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring our podcast as always. Let's jump back into the live chat and let's see what we've got over there for some questions. Brian Lestat wants to know, from all your years in the industry, what is your most favorite memory?
Honestly, kind of like the first week or so that I broke into the business with the AWA. I just had an amazing experience about 2 weeks ago. A guy by the name of Joe Chupek, we used to call him Polish Joe, and a guy by the name of Mick Karch. Mick Karch was a ring announcer for the AWA in Minneapolis, and they have another podcast partner, and I'm sorry, I think his name is Chris, but I can't remember his last name. Anyway, Joe Chupek, I worked with Joe, was a couple years younger than me, probably 5 or 6 years younger than me, and he was the director and the editor, head of post-production for AWA when I first went to work there. Had a lot of amazing experiences. Hadn't talked to Joe in decades. And then I got an email from him saying, hey, we'd love to have you. There's a podcast in Minneapolis that celebrates the AWA. It's all things AWA. And I was a guest on that about 2 weeks ago and just had such a great time talking about those memories, because many of them I just forgot about. I don't have anybody to share them with. My wife wasn't there. I mean, not in the office. She was at home. But, some of the things that I experienced my first couple of years in the industry, there's nobody in my world I can reminisce with about those things, except for Joe Chupek. And we just had so much fun on that podcast. I can't wait to do the next one. But that was a magic time for me. I never thought about getting into the wrestling business. I never aspired to it. It wasn't a goal in any way, shape, or form. And just one day, kind of randomly, I'm offered a job to come and work for the AWA and head up their sales and syndication. I didn't even know what syndication meant. And there was no such thing as Google back then. Guy that actually did the hiring, his name was Mike Shields. He says, hey, Eric, Vern would like to bring you in. I can tell you're a great salesman. We want to make you the head of our syndication. I went, that's awesome. I got out to my car and I'm thinking, what the fuck is syndication? Why am I the head of it? I don't even know what it is.
Why am I the head of it?
I'm going to take the job because, damn, I get to work for the AWA and Vern Gagne, and I'm going to learn about the television business and the wrestling business. So fuck yeah, I'm taking a job, but I'm not even sure what it is. I figured it out, what it meant, and I had it was an amazing experience. I look back at that very fondly. And I've had a lot of other ones, going to North Korea, being being in North Korea, running through the streets of Pyongyang, North Korea in the dark by myself, only to watch the sun come up and the citizens of Pyongyang, North Korea look at me like I was a fucking three-headed monster. That was pretty cool. That's a good memory. It's one I'll never forget. Becoming friends with Muhammad Ali. That was, to this day, well, I mean, it was pretty special. I got to meet Muhammad Ali. We went to a couple times, and then we ended up spending time together in North Korea, where I really got to know him. Had more one-on-one time with him there. Every other time I had met Muhammad Ali, up until that point, it was part of a big event. There were always other people around. You know, even when we brought him into WCW, and he was part of our one of our big events in Detroit, a pay-per-view. I can't remember which one. And Muhammad Ali was there, and we presented him a check. But even then, there was a bunch of people around. When I was in North Korea with him, we just had one-on-one time, just him and I.
Wow.
And then I got to know him. But the most touching part of it was about a year or two later. It was a couple years later. Muhammad Ali had already lit the torch in the Olympics in Atlanta. And if you remember that scene, when Muhammad Ali went up there, his hand, because of the Parkinson's, was so shaky that, it was obvious while he was lighting the Olympic torch. And I hadn't seen Muhammad. That was in 96. I hadn't seen Muhammad since 95 when we were in Korea together. And I think it was in 98, could have been 97, one or the other, at a New Year's Eve show. The Japanese office, Antonio Inoki and Mr. Saito, invited Lori and I and our kids. They invited us over to Japan for the New Year's Eve celebration, because their New Year's Eve show was like the biggest show of the year. And it's a big thing in Tokyo. New Year's Eve is pretty cool over there. So the Japanese office flew my wife and my kids over, and we went to this big Tokyo Dome show. And surprising to me, Muhammad Ali was there. They had also invited Muhammad Ali. I didn't know they were going to invite him. And I saw Muhammad, and we made eye contact across the room. We were in a green room, and he started making his way in my direction. And I wanted to go over and say hello. And he pulled me aside, and we sat down. There was a light green couch. I'll never forget. We sat down, and because there was people all around, and it was a little noisy. And Muhammad, he could whisper, like if he whispered in your ear, he could enunciate fairly well. You could tell what he was saying. He just couldn't speak like we are here.
Mm-hmm.
So Muhammad Ali leaned in close to my ear so I could hear him. And he said, "Do you think I embarrassed myself?" And at first I was confused. And I said, "Muhammad, what do you mean embarrass yourself?" He goes, "At the Olympics, because of my hand." And I started crying.
Wow.
To this day, telling that story still hits me. Who has that memory?
Just you and him.
Who?
Wow.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of other people had similar things, with other people. For me, it was Muhammad Ali. But, to be able to have a moment like that with someone like Muhammad Ali, what a gift. I mean, it was such a blessing. And that is one of my favorite memories. But I have so many of those. There's too many for me to really count, but those are the ones that come to mind at first.
Man, crazy to think about that moment of basically cocky's maybe not the right word, confident, charismatic Muhammad Ali, just his persona of I'm the best in the world, and I'm going to tell you I'm the best in the world, and then go out and beat you like the best in the world does. But that moment of vulnerability of, worried about, maybe worries not, but thinking about that persona of, did I embarrass myself? And I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think watching it, I think it made us like him even more.
And I tried to tell him that. I said, "Muhammad, I was flabbergasted that he said that, because I remember sitting at home watching it, and I was like, oh my, I was a wreck. I mean, that was so emotional. I mean, I was full of joy. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But and that's why I was so confused when he asked me that question. And then I tried to explain to him that, I mean, I had never been so moved by anything that I watched on the screen ever, and very little else in real life. I mean, it was just amazing. But yeah, we had that conversation, and it was funny because shortly after that conversation, um, we got up and we're moving around the room because again, a lot of everybody wanted to say hello and all that. And I looked over, and Garrett, my son, who was probably only 12 at the time, yeah, I was probably 12. I look over and there's Muhammad Ali and my son, like shooting a breeze. What is my son talking to Muhammad Ali about? And I started walking over there, and I see Muhammad whispering in my son's ear. And then Garrett would whisper in his ear. I'm going, and they're laughing, they're smiling. I'm like, what is going on? So I asked Garrett later on, and Howard Bingham, who was he was on that North Korean trip. Howard Bingham was Muhammad Ali's photographer, at least on that trip. And I looked over and I see Howard Bingham taking a picture of Muhammad Ali and my son Garrett with Muhammad's arm around him. That was a good memory. That was pretty cool. And I asked Garrett later, I go, what were you guys talking about? He said, Muhammad asked me how many girlfriends I had. I said, well, what did you tell me? He said, I told him I didn't have any girlfriends. I said, well, what did he say? He goes, tell me the truth, young man. Tell me the truth.
So good. So good. What great memories, man. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah, it was fun. Well, no, that's why I like doing this show sometimes, and especially questions like this, because I don't, that memory is just, not that I don't have it or think about it from time to time, but I enjoy sharing that because it sometimes reminds me of some of the cool shit I got to do that it's easy to forget about.
Let's jump back into the questions. We've got David GI3 says, Eric, you said in the last show that Vince McMahon has the higher power in the WWF, and as we all saw, went on Nitro and spoiled it. But how did he find out? He never explained how he knew it was Vince last week.
I am thoroughly confused.
Eric
said in the last show that Vince
McMahon was the higher power in the WWF.
Yeah,
and as we all saw, went on Nitro and spoiled it.
I did that.
How did
he find out? Meaning, how did I find out?
How did you find out? You never explained it. How you knew it was Vince.
Now I understand the question. That's a good question. Thank you. I would imagine it had to have been a tape show, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't have known, because that wasn't at the same show that Rockin' McFoley wrestled.
Foley,
I think so. I'm guessing it was a tape show. If it wasn't a tape show, I would have found out probably through Zane Bresloff, who had pretty close contacts with some higher up people in WWE, and occasionally Zane would hear shit that he would feed me. I generally wouldn't act on it because I never knew if it was real or not. Not that I thought Zane would lie to me, but I assumed people would lie to Zane because they knew Zane would lie to me,
right?
Or pass it on. Zane wouldn't lie to me, but Zane would pass on what he had heard and this is what happens with dipshit Dave Meltzer a lot. He thinks he's got sources. What he's got are generally one of two categories of people: either kind of meaningless people that just happen to still hang on and have a job there, that feed Dave stuff because they think it will endear them to Dave Meltzer and maybe he'll write something nice about them. That's probably a smaller and smaller percentage of Dave's contacts. I think a lot of them are just boys that fuck with him. And now I know that happens because I haven't done it, but I know other people that have and tell me about it when it happens. They intentionally mislead him to make him look like a dipshit, or just to get the audience off base a little bit. So they're feeding him stuff because he's a useful fucking idiot. He's just a tool, and they know they can use him because he wants to be accepted so badly and to be recognized as a credible journalist so badly that it makes it easy just to fuck with him.
It's like the old War Spies where they would Hey, let's see who's leaking this. Let's let this out to somebody and this out to somebody. See which one gets back around. We can start finding where our
But
hole
it's
is.
not just like WWE. I mean, it was, who was it, about a year and a half, 2 years ago? Some guy, just caught Dave red-handed republishing a fake fucking story as if it was a fact. And Dave had to admit it. He came clean and said, "Yeah, I did that." But he's such a fucking hack that it's pretty easy to mess with him. And he thinks he's getting good info. That's the funny part.
All right, we got two more questions for you, Eric. We appreciate your time. So we got two more here. WCW versus NWO World Tour and WCW Revenge had a massive impact on the wrestling video game genre and are still remembered fondly by fans today due to their revolutionary gameplay. What are your thoughts on the legacy of these games and their commercial success at the time? Additionally, can you share any specific memories or behind the scenes stories about the development and promotion of these games?
I really didn't get involved at all in the gaming side of things. Number one, because video games were still evolving at that point, and I was never a video game guy. So I let people that understand the business or understood the business at that point kind of head up those efforts. I very rarely would get involved. I would approve certain things, but I very rarely got involved. The only involvement I had was with EA Sports, and I'm not sure if it was EA Sports that put out the WCW NWO Revenge or not. But that was our first really big licensing deal. And I remember going to the EA Sports headquarters in LA, picking up a check for $5 million as an advance on royalties. And I was pretty happy that day. Very, very happy. But that was it, man. That's the extent of my involvement. I picked up a check.
WCW developed by AKI and published by THQ.
Okay, THQ.
THQ.
All right. THQ must have been before EA Sports.
All right, we've got one. We got one more question, and then we will get to Midian to send you out on a good note.
Oh, great! I thought we forgot about that. Oh shit!
All right, here we go. Eric Marecki says, "Just want to let you both know how much you guys mean to people out there. I'm going through a very hard time getting divorced, losing my dad, and losing my job a few months ago. I have 3 young children, ages 8, 6, and 4. There were a lot of days I didn't feel like getting out of bed. I'm a wrestling fan since 1986, but was exclusively a WWF WWE fan. I obviously knew about Eric and WCW, but rarely watched it. I started listening to your guys' podcast in March after I lost my job, and I'm all the way up to episode 300. I admire and respect Eric so much for what he accomplished, and he is truly a mentor that people should look up to and emulate. You both have no idea how much your work means to ordinary people who may be struggling. You guys literally saved me when I was at my lowest, and I can't thank you enough for what you do. Just hearing Eric's voice soothes me and gives me the strength to do what I have to do for my kids and keeps me going. I know this may sound a little over the top, but I want you both to know what you mean to some people and how important what you do is. Thank you, and I wish you both the best. Thanks, Eric." Thank you, Eric, man. That is amazing.
I was at River City WrestleCon in St. Augustine, Florida last weekend, and had that type of conversation with a number of people. And it's one of the reasons I love doing them. And the people at River City WrestleCon were so great. The promoters were outstanding. The event was great. It was a beautiful facility. Wasn't crowded. Wasn't too hot. It was an awesome event. But when you have conversations with people and they share these things with you, and it makes you realize that, we all do what we do every day for a living because it's our job. It's how we pay our bills. It's what we like to do, whatever the motivations are. But for me personally, as a result of doing this podcast and doing more public appearances and things like that, and hearing more stories like that, it makes me value what I was a part of, not what I accomplished. Forget about that. What I got to be a part of because I didn't realize while I was a part of it that it actually can help people, touch people, brings people together. The very fact that, you know, a mom and a dad and a son, or mother and daughter, or father and son, or uncle and whatever, all sit around and watch wrestling together and spend time together, it has value. You know, I think anything that anytime you can bring families together where they're sharing an experience is a good thing. And on top of it, your stories like that, and it makes me appreciate the opportunity. It makes me more grateful for the blessings that I've had, and makes me look forward to go out there and meeting guys like Eric next time I'm in town. It's cool. Thank you, man. Now we got to hear from Midian.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. And thanks for all of y'all for interacting with us and watching and telling us your stories and how you got into it, and what you love about the show and what you love about Eric. So we appreciate all of that. We appreciate you, Eric, for that message. We got you in a good mood, buttered you up just for a little Midian footage.
Oh, God.
Bischoff was kind of a karate guy, and you know, he knew who my stepdad was, and he was just an announcer, and we're in the bar, and he's like, "Oh, come on!" He wanted to be all tough and everything, and he started like getting in my face and like, "Oh, show me what you got." I'm like, "Dude, just leave me alone." And he started getting in my face, and I fucking grabbed him and I threw him over a table, and he jumps up and he comes at me, and I kind of like hip toss him and go to punch him, and his wife starts crying. And he looks at her and he looks at me and he stands up. He's like, we're just playing and everything. I was like, fuck you. But I love Eric. But that was just a funny beat up Eric Bischoff story, you know, which a lot of people wanted to do.
Oh, still.
That is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. I'm going to have to ask my wife if that actually ever happened, or if this motherfucker fell on his head one too many times. I have never squared off with anybody or even fucked around with anybody other than maybe Larry Zbyszko when we were training for a match. That's fucking bizarre.
Fuck you. I love Eric Bischoff. That was a great. Look, Midian does mushrooms sometimes. That's all right. Maybe he was on them that day.
I'm gonna go into my house, and Mrs. B is gonna be at Top Guy this year in Chicago.
Okay.
And I'm going to go and ask my wife if that actually ever happened. And if it did, I want her to tell the story in front of me, live in front of the audience. So we'll find out.
I feel like if she watched you get thrown by Midian and started crying,
First of all,
remember it.
First of all, that motherfucker wasn't throwing anybody anywhere. I mean, at the peak of
look, he brought a broke his monitor, guys.
where? Did we lose you? Are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Everything went dark for a minute.
Yeah.
All right, we should probably wrap this up. I gotta go eat. I gotta ask my wife about this fucking Midian horse shit.
Before we get out of here, of course, do some housekeeping. Everybody, if you were business targets, 25 to 54-year-old men, there's no better place to advertise than right here with us on 83 Weeks. You've heard us do ads for some of the same companies for years. And why? Because it works. And with our super targeted audience, there's very little waste. So go to advertisewitheric.com now and find out more about advertising with 83 Weeks. Also, our good buddy, Mr. Conrad Thompson, he can help you out. Right now, your home is worth probably more than it's ever been. So combine all your debts into one monthly payment, or maybe do all those home upgrades you've always dreamed of. On top of that, skip 2 house payments. Put that newfound equity to work and go to savewithconrad.com. Like, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating on all platforms. Twitter handles, he's at E Bischoff. Follow at Hey, it's Conrad. Tell him how much you missed him. Instagram at The Real Eric Bischoff. Facebook is E Bischoff as well. And of course, the show at 83 Weeks on Twitter, or Twix, as Eric likes to call it, Instagram and Facebook. And have all of our merch at boxofgimmicks.com. Let everyone know you're an Eric Bischoff gal or guy, and the new Wise Choices shirt. And maybe we need a shirt that says, a mummy ran out and buck fucked me, and all I got was this 83 Weeks t-shirt.
Could be
all of that.
It could be the next Nerf gun.
The next Nerf gun.
Some big hot thing.
Go to boxofgimmicks.com. Eric, always fun to talk to you, man. We appreciate your time. Everyone, we appreciate watching live. We appreciate y'all interacting and watching and being part of the AFS family. For Mr. Eric Bischoff, I am Casio. Thank you, Mr. Silva, in the production booth. You've been listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Konnichiwa.